PDS TV, the best in edutainment.
I want to thank all you all in the audience for coming. This won't be a town hall without you all. It's a day that we decided that we were going to come in and make a difference. We went on Channel 46, quite a few of us, Shauna and Dr. Green and quite a few of us here in the audience, and we decided that it just was not going to be a one-day discussion, that we were going to come back and actually have a town hall in our own community to be able to make a difference in youth safety. And so I want you all to sit back and relax, enjoy it. This is a day now. You know how sometimes moms say, I want you to be quiet, don't talk? This is a day I need every voice to be able to say really what you're thinking. Because it's going to be a day today that is going to change and actually form our tomorrow. It's going to be what we need for the next generation to be able to come back and say, no more guns in our school, no more bullying in our school, and we most definitely will not be arming our teachers. So I want you to have these kind of discussions at this table and with our panelists so that they can be able to say that at the end of the day, we as adults sit in the audience and allow them to be able to allow their voices to be heard. I want us to be able to come back and be able to say that at the end of the day, no matter what, we care about our youth here in the Georgia area.
And so the first part will be called rapid round fire. And so this is just to get an idea of the perspective. I'm going to ask the students to say their name, their classification, which school they come from, right before we do the rapid round fire. The rapid round fire will ask them questions that they raise their hand if they have this experience or know of this experience. And so we'll ask them just to say their name, their classification, and which school they come from first.
Hi, my name's Haley Jones. I'm in 11th grade and I go to Dunwoody High School.
Hi, I'm Jacory Neal. I go to MLK High School, and I'm a senior this year.
My name is Zion Cochran. I'm also an 11th grader, and I attend Martin Luther King Junior High.
Hey everyone, my name is Jake Bush, and I'm a senior at Chamblee Charter High School.
Hey y'all, my name is Jordan Parker. I'm in 12th grade, and I go to Southwest DeKalb High School.
Hi everyone, my name is Royce Mann. I'm a sophomore at the Paideia School.
Raise your hand if your teachers encourage parent participation in your school beyond parent-teacher conferences. Raise your hand. Interesting. Raise your hand if you believe violence prevention should be taught at home. Raise your hand if you've witnessed violence in the community. Raise your hand if you think your parents should be involved in your educational experience. Raise your hand if you know someone who has committed suicide. Wow. Woo, okay. Raise your hand if you know of any other friends who feel or on the edge of committing suicide. I just want to hold the hands up for a moment. This is our young folks saying these are people that they know who are on the edge of committing suicide. That's a lot of young folks that's saying they know someone. Thank you. Charles.
Yes. You said you like to have violence prevention taught at home. Can you give me some specific examples of what you mean? Specific examples of what you mean violence prevention should be taught at home.
When I was younger, my uncle, he's a veteran in the armed forces, he taught me about what it means to have a gun and what it means to want to use that gun and what guns are actually used for. Guns are used to kill people, right? Especially military-grade guns. So he taught me that you should only have a gun when you're ready to die. If you're ready to give your life to, save your family, to protect yourself, that is when you should have a gun. But senseless acts of school shootings, of, just playing around with guns, having guns in homes, personally is not acceptable to me.
So I'm Haley, if you couldn't hear can you hear me? All right. So I grew up in a household where, so my family has a military history, and people in my family have been fighting in many wars, and so, but my father is somebody who's not very interested in the violence or the guns or anything like that, and I have cousins who were spanked as children. My parents didn't even believe in spanking or anything along those lines, and I think things like that, like spanking a child, can be good, but even at that low level of punishment can be very effective to students or children. And we have these kinds of discussions in class occasionally, and I think it's really important that parents make it clear that violence is not okay, from guns to hitting other kids.
Yes, I'm Jacory Neal from MLK High School one more time. I believe that violence should be taught at home. When I was coming up younger, thank you. When I was coming up younger, I hope everyone can vouch for me, but I've always heard my parents, other people's parents say, if someone hits you, hit them back. But that's not always the case. I've had to learn that violence is never the answer unless it's in a specific case, meaning that someone is trying to cause harm to you. There's no excuse for violence. I believe that parents should tell their kids that, unless someone is physically trying to put harm onto you, then that's the time to protect yourself. Violence is only used for that reason. But all these senseless acts of gun violence and shooting up the schools and whatnot, that's senseless. There's no reason for that at all, no excuse.
I got one shot. You raised your hand on suicide, young people committing suicide. I asked you 2 questions. Since you know these youngsters, what can you do, and what would you suggest schools to do? Since you're out to commit suicide, I did a study one time of juvenile suicide, and they all project they're asking for help, and nobody realized that until they're gone. So my question is, what can you do, since you know people, and what would you suggest the administration to do to address that problem?
All right, so I'll stand up for this so you can hear me better. So at Chambly, we had my sophomore year, former student at Chambly who was at Clemson, he committed suicide. And then that same year, later that year, there was a current senior at Chambly who also committed suicide. Last year, there was a former student at Chambly who killed himself with a gun. I think that one of the best things that happened when we had new administration come in my sophomore year, we had a new principal, we started something called the Positive Mental Health Steering Committee. We brought in stakeholders from the community, so we brought in religious leaders, we also brought in members from the business community, psychologists, parents at the school, as well as student leaders. And we were working to find solutions to improve mental health among students at school, talking about better testing schedules, so making it so that there weren't as many tests on one day and that students weren't taking so many assessments on one day. We also talked about making it so that there were more community events and more events to engage students with one another, to build up a strong social net for them, and to make sure that they had support from their peers, from their parents in the community, and also from the teachers. So I think that students should be working with administration, and parents need to be encouraging their kids and students to work with administration to find ways to improve mental health, whether that's starting a steering committee or perhaps having a day where students are meeting each other and having an ice cream social, or if they're starting some sort of joy committee like they started at Chambly, where we're giving quotes each day, positive quotes to start the day off right. I think it just comes down to making sure that each and every student feels supported. I think it also means working with different anti-bullying programs. We started Be the Voice at Chambly, which is be the voice that stops bullying. We have letters letters in the windows of our school that can be seen on the street, and we have shirts that people are wearing, and we have meetings after school. So I really think that it just means committing to stopping this bullying, committing to making sure that every student feels like they belong, and committing to making sure that we're talking with the adult stakeholders, the administration, the teachers, the parents. The students are the ones who should be leading that charge, but they need to be encouraged by the adults around them as well.
Yes. Suicide is a very sensitive topic. For example, this week in No Place for Hate, my school is trying to become a No Place for Hate school. I'm an actor, so I performed a monologue based on someone who was a victim of suicide and bullying. And not too long ago, we just had a case of a student, her name was Tion Thomas. She committed suicide. And as I looked into her reasoning, she had friends that didn't take her serious until they heard that she was gone. And I feel that as a student and as a friend, that you should be willing to encourage someone beyond that, because you never know when someone is serious. You know, even though, oh, I'm just playing, that is not a joking matter at all. And personally, I've had that experience of wanting to commit suicide when I was younger because I was a victim of bullying. I wrote out my suicide note. I planned out how I was going to do it, and I had to realize that this too is going to pass, that life is eventually going to get better, that this is not the end. And someone told me that life is not a remote control. You have to get up and change it yourself.
I wanted to add to that. Okay. I think suicide prevention needs to be done on 3 levels. I think it needs to be done on the personal level, and that means interactions day to day with kids at your school, reaching out to people who may feel isolated. I think also it has to be done on the community level, and that means ensuring that your school community has a safe and welcoming environment where all young people feel included. Also your broader community, it's ensuring that your broader community is the same way. I think also when you're talking about suicide and any type of violence that might be perpetrated by a gun, it is also a gun issue. And I know that as somebody who has dealt with depression and who has dealt with suicidal thoughts and suicidal tendencies, if I lived in a family where I had access to a gun in my home, I might not be here today. And I think that that is the same for a lot of young folks. And so that means making sure that if guns are in homes, that they a safe place where only the responsible adults in the home have access to them. That also, I think, means, I think there's some other laws like having mandatory waiting periods to ensure that if somebody goes to try to buy a gun because in that moment they want to die, ensuring that they have to wait a few days before they can actually get that gun, because after a few days, as someone who has mood swings, where one moment I feel like I want to die and another moment life's fine, I think that could save a lot of lives. And so I think it has to be done on 3 levels, and if we can actually do that, then the suicide rate in this country, especially among young people, would go way down.
Thank you so much. Jake, want to add a few more? Go ahead.
And for those of you who don't know, suicides account for 2/3 of the gun deaths in this country. So they are not mutually exclusive issues. Guns and suicide rates are very, very related, and I think that, as Royce was saying, we have to do more about guns to also reduce that suicide rate, because it's not going to stop unless we do something now.
Thank you so much. Ready for our next set of rapid round fire questions. Raise your hand if you know someone from the LBGT community. Raise your hand if you're accepting of those differences. Raise your hand if you have relations and friendships with people from other races. Raise your hand if you're involved in clubs at your school that promote diversity. Raise your hand if there are clubs at your school that promote diversity. And raise your hand if you don't have anything like that at your school. Charles?
Thank you. Yes. Shops with adults, and they have a difficult time explaining a definition for racism. In your own words, can you give me a definition of racism?
Well, in my opinion, racism is thinking that your race is better than any others. And being an African American in this modern day society, there is a lot of instances of racism that we hear all the time. Like on the news, you hear many of our young black men, women being killed by police or black on black crime, or because they were innocent or just at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I believe that, racism is, I don't believe that there's ever going to be a solution to racism. That's just my belief. Yes.
So for the student advocacy question, for this question too, we want to have Haley, Zion, and Jordan be able to chime in.
So what I wanted to say about racism is, to me, the definition of racism is the systematic oppression of one race for the benefit of another. Racism isn't just simply you saying, I don't like said race. Racism comes into play when one race is benefiting off the oppression of another. A lot of people say the Black Lives Matter movement is made to, we don't like whites, we're being racist against whites, but that's not the case. Saying we matter doesn't take away from the fact they matter as well, but it's the fact we are in more of a state of vulnerability than they are. They will not have to experience the things we will. They won't have to have the same experiences we will from the age of a child. And I think that needs to be realized in people saying black people are racist. People who are participating in Black Lives Matter are racist. We're not racist. African Americans cannot be racist because we don't benefit in any way from the act of racism.
So I hope we all know by now that race is a social construct, and that it was created by one man. And that race is when you have the power to influence somebody's life based on the color of their skin. Prejudice is when you simply don't like them based on the color of their skin. So in regard to if African Americans can be racist, in America, no. In continents and countries that are predominantly black, yes. If you have the power to influence someone's life based on the color of their skin, you can be racist.
They covered it very well, and everyone has their own opinion, and I'm a white female, and I really don't feel like I can say I have ever experienced racism in my life. I've experienced prejudice and a good amount of it, but I have never experienced anything that I can say where I have a specific definition of racism, because I haven't experienced it, so I cannot give a definition of it. As a woman, definitely, yeah. As for sexism, I can definitely say that, International Women's Day was that was this week, last week maybe? I can't remember. All my days are meshing together right now. But multiple people asked me, some were as a joke and some were very serious, why is there an International Women's Day? Why isn't there an International Men's Day? Which there is. It's in November. And it's something that people need to ask, like, why do you need to ask? And it's, so like, one kid asked me, like, or a group of girls really, he was like, have you ever been, we asked him, have you ever been catcalled? And he said no, and he asked us, and we all said, like, every single girl, from the 14-year-olds there to the 16, 17-year-olds, we all said yes, like, not a single girl said no, and that's, so I would say my definition of sexism is the ability of men to be able to overpower women in our society that has like been instated in our minds, and it's been since very young ages that it's been instated in our heads.
I think Jake made a mention of the school, again, in the environment, and then sometimes those of us as parents and other children who have the experience of teachers who and administrators who don't treat them a certain way. And sometimes that is a violent reaction to that, that labels the students. So this is the next rapid round fire, and again, students in the audience participate. Raise your hand if you see the bus drivers, cafeteria staff, custodians, and front office staff as a part of your educational team. Raise your hand if the majority of your teachers inspire you to think critically and behave properly. Raise your hand if your teachers maintain a positive attitude towards students. Interesting. Raise your hand if your principal is visible and accessible to you. That's good, Dr. Green. Raise your hand if your principal promotes student leadership and youth voices for you all. Raise your hand if your principal is respected as the leader by all or most of the stakeholders. Raise your hand if you see your counselors more than once. Raise your hand if you haven't seen your counselor at all this school year. Some folks back there. Raise your hand if your advisement includes anti-bullying, anti-violence, and anti-suicide type of concerns and issues and topics. And last question, raise your hand if your school has social emotional learning practices. Okay, so we got some work to do on that one. Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to say to the students that haven't seen their counselor, you can go see your counselor. Take the initiative. Don't wait for them to see you. My question to the panel is, you mentioned that teachers sometimes don't treat you as human beings. My question to the panel is, what can you do?
Well, I've had an instance where I've been disrespected by a teacher. I've had an instance where a teacher was talking about me openly to other students. And it was recently, actually. But what I've done is I've learned to take on, I was raised with tough skin in my family. So I've learned to deal with other people, and I've learned that everybody's not gonna like me. So what I did was, I talked to an administrator and let them know what happened, and I talked to another teacher that dealt with the situation. But it is precautions that you can take. I feel like that we're in an educational system now where teachers have the final say-so. And that's very, I feel like that's wrong, because if a student gets in trouble or something of that nature, they always take the adult side before they take the child side, and I feel like they never get the full story. So in that way, I feel like students don't have the voice.
Do you feel that there is too much pressure to perform in school? Example, requirements that all essays are typed when everybody doesn't have a computer, coaches communicating with the team through cell phone messages. Do you feel that there is too much pressure to perform in school, and how do you believe that it is shown and manifested in students?
Okay, so in my school, like for a lot of kids, it's if you don't take an AP class, you're an outlier, like, or at least in my like community and like my group of friends and the people I interact with, if you are not taking at least one AP class, like I've taken 2 AP classes in high school. I've taken AP Psychology, AP World, and they have been ridiculously hard classes. Like for AP World, it's like, here's this like, it's like 500-page book and it's super dense, and you are reading 3 or 4 chapters a night of just some of this history stuff that you're just like, why do I even care about Neanderthals 10,000 years ago? Like, it literally doesn't make sense. And for some of the problems in my school that we see is there have been times where people in our arts area, it's our basement where our band and orchestra are, we have to make it all the way to the 3rd floor where all of the math classes are, and none of the classrooms are very like, nothing is very conveniently placed, and hallways are deep, pretty crowded, especially in the mornings. And our counselors, we have 5 or 6 counselors, I think, and in the 1 month of March, there's about, I want to say like 400 juniors at our school. They have to meet with almost every single one of us so we can plan for college next year and get everything on track. And so the counselors don't have time, and they're also dealing with all the seniors and making sure they can graduate, so they don't have time for the underclassmen, which is a real problem because there's only so much they can do.
A group that I'm part of who are organizing this event right now, and what we're marching for is we're marching against gun violence, and that seems very broad. And so what we're marching for is common sense gun legislation, for sure. We have a detailed policy platform that we will be releasing later today on our social media, MFOL Georgia, if you want to follow us. We're also marching for any other solutions that could prevent gun violence. So that means more welcoming school environments, for sure, better community environments. But we are definitely focusing on legislation. We think that at the state level and at the national level, there's a lot that our elected officials can do to prevent gun violence, and they haven't done nearly enough so far. And so we're claiming our voices. We're standing up, speaking up, and saying that something has to be done now. And so that's what we are marching for on the 24th.
Thank you.
We're honored to have this panel here, distinguished panel, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and give one reason why they're here. I need your silence because this now becomes part of the solution. These are our leaders, and they have some solutions and also some activities and some vision for what the young people said. Yeah.
I am Mrs. Vicki Turner, and I serve on the Board of Education for DeKalb County, representing District 5. And today has been very enlightening to hear what our students have had to say. And as Dr. Green was taking copious notes, so was I. And I believe we can take those back to our schools and impact the environment for better. So thank you for Ms. Tuff for the opportunity to be here today and to hopefully be a part of the solution for good in our community.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all here. I'm a county commissioner, and my job is to build on the assets of this community. Where you are now is the first intergenerational center in the Southeast. This used to be a parking lot, and so this is a new 30,000 square foot facility. You see seniors and young people all working out. This is an intergenerational operation where everything we do here is focused on all generations working together. And so I appreciate you all coming and being a part of this. I don't want this to be your last time. I want you to come on back and be a part. But what I would like to say is an African proverb that says, we make the path by walking it together. And that's why we're here today.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Steve Green, the superintendent of DeKalb County School District. I want to thank Ms. Tuff for reaching out and organizing this event. I think it's an important step in the right direction as we attempt to reshape and rebuild. And I'm so proud, so very proud to hear our student voices, to hear their intellect, to hear their thinking. They are the future of this community going forward. Why am I here? I'm here because this is who I am. This is what I do. 42 years in education. I have been across this country in different settings, but I've always been an advocate for children. I've always been an advocate for creating pathways where barriers were in the way and removing those barriers so young voices can be heard, so promising futures can be built. I've done it wherever I've gone. I will do it to the day I die.
Good afternoon. My name is Major Johnson of the DeKalb County Police Department. I'm the precinct commander of the South Precinct. To hear the young minds speak today was very inspirational to me, just to hear you articulate your feelings and what you see and how you feel. I'm here to learn from you. That's why I'm here, because I care what your opinions are, and I'm here to learn from you.
Good afternoon. My name is TJ Wilson. I am the owner-operator of Chick-fil-A Wesley Chapel Road, right around the corner from this building. I'm here for two reasons. Number one, I'm here as a parent. I have a 6-year-old son, a 4-year-old daughter, and an 11-month-old daughter who will be coming up through school. So I'm here to listen to what's going on in the schools. As a parent, guess what? I don't know. You guys are the experts. So if anything, I'm here to listen and learn. Secondly, I have a lot of young people who work in my business every single day. So to hear what they're going through, what are they bringing to the business, it helps me better prepare them for their future, as well as to be a better mentor for them as they continue to grow and develop. So I want to thank the students for being here today. Thank you.
Hello, I am Antoinette Tuff, the founder of Kids on the Move for Success. And I want to thank all of my panelists and my student panelists that are here today. For me, what I wanted to get out of this is to be able to allow us all to come together and have some conversation. We have never had conversation around youth safety in DeKalb County, and this is my county. Even though I live in Texas and fly here and come back, we put an office here. And it's important for me, for my students here in my mentoring program and those that I come in contact with, to be able to have an actual safe community. And so I wanted to come back and have some dialogue, but not only that, but I also put them in a safe environment that they could have that dialogue, that they wouldn't be judged, wouldn't be criticized, but they could be able to say whatever on their hearts, and we would listen as adults to be able to allow their voices to be heard. And so for me, it was important for me to be able to do that, to allow our next generation to know that we care about them.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Lynn Deutsch, and I'm a city council person in Dunwoody, but I'm also a DeKalb County school parent. This would be the 19th year in a row that I've had a child in DeKalb County schools. So I was invited by my friend Jill to serve on this panel, and I'm very pleased to do it. So after the shootings at Sandy Hook, where we lost 20 little children and nothing changed, I have to say I gave up hope in terms of real change ever happening. And so now, though the situation is tragic as to why we're here, for the first time in a long time as it relates to safety in our schools and our community at large, I have hope that change can happen because, ironically, the children are going to lead us there. And so that is why I am here, and I am very honored, and our students were very impressive.
Let's start with school safety and also expand it to community safety. So Major Johnson, the police department they're first responders. So can you give us an overview of what's happening in specifically South DeKalb, but generally DeKalb as a county? What's happening with safety in schools and safety in the community from a perspective of the police department?
We work very closely with the DeKalb School Police because they have the ultimate responsibility of protecting the school when the students are there. So it's communicating with the police chief and the administrators at the schools to find out what's going on, what they hear. They hear a lot of the things that are going on as far as, any gang activities or any bullying, and the kids have to leave schools. So when they leave the school, it's kind of like passed on to DeKalb police. So it's very, very important that we communicate and have a relationship, because if something happens, we're in this together. If they have something off campus, they let us know, and we will assist them, and vice versa. So that relationship is very, very vital, that we keep that relationship and that communication.
Well, first, my thought process goes to board policy. We have board policy JAA, which actually speaks directly to why I even chose to come to DeKalb County School District and be the superintendent. It speaks directly to appreciation for diversity. It speaks directly to my core belief in terms of letting multiple voices be heard. And so, in a number of different positions that we have taken as a school district with the backing of the board, we had some dress rehearsals before March the 14th ever occurred. If you remember, the president came out with a travel ban earlier in the year. If you remember also, the DREAM Act was threatened. It continues to be threatened for our dreamers. And we had students who wanted to demonstrate and show their concern about the situation in various of our high schools. We allowed that to happen in a safe, meaningful way. And so we saw those as essences of a way we could go forward. I also had going through my head a personal situation. When I was assistant superintendent in another school district in Indianapolis, Indiana, before that I was assistant principal at one of the high schools. By the time I became assistant superintendent, some of the same students that I'd worked with in the high school they were sophomores when I was there, but then I got pushed up to being assistant superintendent. That was when, many of you may not realize, the Rodney King event took place, and many of our students, the same students I'd worked with in high school as leadership, they stood across from me and said, Dr. Green, number one, if this had happened back in the 60s, you'd be where we are. And they also said that you trained us when you were assistant principal to stand up and speak out for what we believe in, and we worked together to allow all the students in that school to come out to the stadium and show their concern about police brutality. That was the issue at the time. So I carry that with me. I carry that moment with me, and so when it came upon this decision, it was easy for me to say this is real life. When we talk to our students about real world application of the curriculum, real life situations, current events, what more way can you get involved and make it a part of the curriculum and make it a learning experience that's real, not from a textbook, not from the internet, but it's real. What's more real than this moment right here where students are making history? So that was, and my premise was to allow their voice to be heard and ask the adults to recede and to step back, to be a guide on the side, and let them be the sage on the stage and let them present. And that was my thinking at the time.
I was just an ordinary person, a bookkeeper that day, but I didn't see a gunman. I didn't see what was in front of me. I didn't see the young man in front of me with an AK-47 and over 500 rounds of ammo and telling me that he didn't take his medicine and he was going to and fro and allowing me to know that we all were going to die. I didn't see that. What I seen was a young man standing in front of me going to and fro crying out for help. Just like our kids today are crying out for help. It's just a different cry. So for me, it's like, who's going to stop their busy lives to hear the cry? And it goes back to what you said at Sandy Hook. Those babies couldn't speak out. Those babies were silently crying for help, and no one listened. So what we did is had more school shootings and more shootings in our communities. I thank God for this Florida incident, and the reason why is this. We did have lives that were taken, but for the first time, our students said, enough is enough. And so their cry got louder. So I didn't see a young man standing there. It was the same loud cry that was in Florida, the same one we hear every day. We have to now just stop our busy lives for a moment and say, that's a cry.
Because I grew up in an environment in Chicago where we had metal detectors in high school. That was in the 80s, and that we went through a lot of those things that you see now. But what I would tell us is not to think because you're in a quote-unquote suburbanized school district that these issues and problems that won't happen in this area. You have things that occur in these communities. If you look at the mental health, the socioeconomic impact of what has transpired, violence has been part of America for a long, long, long time. And this is a disease that has to be broken. Now we just have another group of folks who are going through it, and that's why I want you all to always stay woke. Don't fall asleep, because if you look throughout history, we've been dealing with these issues for a long, long time. It's just as it's your generation time to stand up and rise up and show us what you're going to do. You had, in the 50s, you had this, the 60s, the 70s, but it was just a different type of issue. But there's a lot of things around violence and where we have to go. Now I'm in a position of leadership as a leader, as a person who sets public policy, as a person who not on the other side where I come from an area in Inglewood where we had at least 600-700 homicides in the 80s when I was growing up each year. So I saw the blood, I saw not the Crips, but the disciples, the El Rukin gangs that try to take over our communities. So now we're at the point now, where do we go from here? So once you leave school in May, you're going to be back in the community June, July, and August. What's going to happen during that time period? What are you going to do as a community? Because it's not just going to be upon the elected folks up here. It's all about us working together as a community and what we're going to do. So if we take the summer off, we're going to lose the battle. You got to make sure you plan, and keep moving. So if y'all go to Washington, D.C. this summer, it's okay. Everybody don't have to be there. But this is election year. So everybody be campaigning back in their districts, congressmen, senators, all of those folks, governors, lieutenant governors. This is the time, this is the season for you to stand up and understand what's going on and keep the pressure on. I got my hero out here, Mr. Royce. He keeps me involved, he keeps me engaged. And he said, Commissioner, I'm going to work with you to make it happen. So this is not new, but it's new for you, but just don't fall asleep.
Very good. It's several things I've thought about during the time I've been sitting here this morning. And I had the privilege of watching Ms. Tuff being interviewed, I believe at a town hall discussion. And she said something then, and she said it today. She said, first and foremost, I honor the Lord. She did. And I do believe that God still looks for ordinary people who are willing to stand out in front of challenges, acknowledge Him, and He directs us. I still believe that. We need more Antoinette Tuffs. And I believe as public elected officials, whatever, superintendents, it's incumbent upon us to hear the cry of the earth. Our children are groaning. And I do believe that our children have stood out in front of this issue, Dr. Green, because many of the adults stood silent. I really do. I believe that our children said enough because the adults were silent to what was happening to their children. And so sometimes things have to come real close to us, come to our house before it awakes us. And as the commissioner said, we stay woke. Safety has been, every parent has the right and expectation to take their children to school and have them return home at the end of the day safely. Everybody should expect that. But we're living in a critical time. We're dealing with social, emotional issues. We're dealing with mental health issues that we have got to wake up and say we have got to become a part of the solution. Our children have mental health issues, and guess what, children? Teachers have mental health issues. It is a community issue that is impacting all of us. And so today, this is just scratching the surface, but it would be sad if it stops just at today.
As was indicated earlier, I took notes listening to our students while they were speaking. And solutions came, I think, from some of the notes and some of the voices that I heard. I heard, for instance, the importance of a caring person, a caring adult in every child's life. And I heard and I saw in some cases, and I saw on the back table here, sometimes there was disconnect. There were young people who are going through our school system and they're not connected to a caring adult. That disturbs me. But I was on the other side of that, I was pleased to see that when they asked about bus drivers, when they asked about the food service, when they asked about the custodians, that many of them raised their hand and said they had a relationship. So we've got to broaden the definition of what it means to be in touch with a young person, to be in touch with an adult. It doesn't have to be the teacher all the time. It doesn't have to be the counselor all the time. I remember when I was going to school, the person who knew the most about what was going on in my school was the head custodian. He knew everybody and everything that was going on in the building. And we went to him with stuff that we wouldn't go to anybody else about. So all caring adults have to stand and speak up and step up and be willing to embrace the young person who comes to them and to recognize the signs. So my takeaway from that as a solution is, how do we get everybody trained up? We do a lot of professional development across this district, but do we train our bus drivers? Do we train our custodians? Do we train our food service workers to recognize the signs of depression, to recognize the sign of frustration and isolation that could lead to suicide, could lead to gun violence? I think they're all interconnected in many ways.
As you understand county government, people understand we're the last ones on the ballot, but the first ones called. Vicki, myself, and school board members, but everybody look at the top, the governor, the president, and then when you look at them, you can't reach them, you call us. But these issues comes from national policy, state policy, and guess what? The result is the murder, the crime, all that comes in our community. But I'm glad y'all are starting at the top, where you have to get some solutions first. So that common sense ban, the weapon ban, and talking about common sense gun control, those are things, your policy statements that you in line with and trying to do. That's where you have to go to make things happen. And so our job is to undergird those policies once they're passed, to make sure we have laws on the book that's in line with what the national and state level is. Otherwise, we can't do anything until the federal laws are changed and state laws change. So I think you're doing it at the right time and doing what you have to do. The other part is the bullying part, and I think that's very important. We have to get to the point where we just don't talk about mental health because it's the buzzword of the day. We got to get to the point where we understand that when people grow up in traumatized situations, that when you're in a situation where you're around abuse, where you're around a lot of drugs, a lot of fighting and cussing, a lot of times those kids withdraw from the situation. Then when they come to school, when you ask to participate in classroom activities, a lot of folks don't understand why this child not participating, because they've already, before they left their house, they may not have had food, they may be dealing with guns, beatings, of domestic issues. We have to get an understanding as a community, what does trauma-involved care means? What does adverse childhood experiences mean, from poverty to domestic violence, to gang violence, to why I got more package stores and pawn shops?
Disruptive. Students have been so disruptive. I'm scared to think of a teacher having a weapon. I am scared of that. And while it's incumbent upon us to come up with solutions, but I do believe it's going to take cross-collaboration like this table. It's not going to come out of just one pocket. It's not going to be just federal. It's not going to be just state, it's county. It's all of us parents coming to the table and coming up with workable solutions. But I want to go on record. Teachers having weapons in those classrooms is a nightmare waiting to happen.
So, and I'm gonna be very transparent and honest with you guys. I'm all about, military grade weapons should not be allowed to be purchased every day on any corner. That's just common sense. And I think, where's Zion? Is that her name, Zion? She said it. That's just common sense to me. But I also believe that leaders really solve problems. And if we want to get to the problems of what's going on in our community, we got to start relationships. Plain and simple. We can talk about bullying, we can talk about assault weapons, we can talk about suicide, but it all comes down to the fundamental relationships that we make or don't make with the people beside us, with the people around us, with the people that we see each and every day. So if we really want to get serious about the fundamental foundational root cause of a lot of what's going on is kids feel isolated. Listening to you all talk today, what I kept hearing is there's this survival mentality happening in our schools. Rather than kids wanting to thrive, it's like we just here to survive. It's very isolationist, it's very me against everybody else, it's very am I in the right clique or group or on the right team so that I can be accepted, as well as if I have a problem, do I have people in that group that I can go to? So I think the best thing that we can do first is, from a teacher standpoint, you can't teach someone how to care. They either do or they don't. This is what we talk about in business. Caring isn't a skill, it's a will. So do I love you? Do I like you? I can't lead people who I don't like. Plain and simple. So you guys are fortunate to have a superintendent who loves you, so guess what? He's going to do a good job of leading you. May not do everything that you like, but he's going to do what he thinks is the right thing for you because he cares about you. That's the foundational, right? So we're at a good starting point. Beyond that, we have to have teachers who actually like our students, who love teaching, who have a passion about it. Because guess what? Without that, right, I can engage with you in a real relationship. If I have something going on, it's hard for me to really engage with you, right, students, if you know I don't really care about you. Am I telling the truth? Right? So I think that's where we need to start with the bullying standpoint. We have to be honest with each other enough to have an honest communication and conversation, as well as we got to address these root issues of, hey, can we have an honest conversation? Can we get along? Do we like each other? Do we love each other? And from that, a lot of solutions I think will start to come out.
Well, it is the Second Amendment to the Constitution, and it's second for a reason. Yes, people have a right to bear arms, but I think our students mentioned it eloquently. In defense of, in a situation where their lives are threatened. But you know, a part of America's history is this westward movement and Wild Wild West and some of the things that we see, and so people have stretched that amendment to mean that they can do anything, anytime, with any weapon. That's not what the Constitution intended. That being said, there's a First Amendment, and the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason. The right to speak, the right to protest, the right to address Congress, to address the president, to address the establishment in terms of overruling a bad decision or a mistake that may be made in an interpretation of the Constitution. So therefore, if we're going to kind of go down this path of First and Second Amendment rights, I say the First Amendment supersedes the Second Amendment.
Do better in school and not focus on mental health, which has to come before anything else, or else things like gun violence happen.
Do you like the mental health steering committee that was, I think it was Jake mentioned in Shamley, it's something that registered with me. What do you think about that mental health steering committee? With parents, and with teachers, with students.
We have clubs, I'll say that, and they do try and branch out a lot more than they have in the past this year. But as far, we need more programs like that where they can come together, not just SGA, which is our Student Government Association. That's more geared towards school life, but there are other things happening outside of your school life. Is in a lot more so for the people at my school. And I just feel like if they had someone to tell them that they were worth more, if they had better opportunities. Kids at my school see the life that they're living as this is their end all be all. And school is just where they go for 8 hours because that's what's legally required. And that's all it is to them. And that's all they know. But if they were to come together and decide they were more than that, if they could come together maybe during we have an advisement, if they could come together.
Do you have an advisory period? Do you have an advisory period?
Yeah, it's not a period, but it's during our second block. We're on block second now. Our second block, we have like 35 minutes, which is our advisement.
Right.
And typically, they'll give us like something. I think it comes from the county.
Yeah.
And it's something that we work on something like that. But I just think there needs to be more togetherness from one another. They don't listen to adults, but they'll listen to one another.
So less isolationism, more together. Less, kind of these cliques and silos that people kind of drift into, and they just. Well, from a community standpoint, because I've always believed that the community is the school community is a smaller version of what's happening in the larger community, and so and they start talking about, I just want to survive and get through. That if that's the way people are living in the community, then the school is going to be like, I'm just trying to survive. Don't give me a whole lot to distract me. I'm just trying to get through these 4 years or these 3 years. And so how do we get out of survival and get into thriving?
Well, that's a good question. One of the things is, how connected are we to the people in our neighborhoods? Because our neighborhoods become strangerhoods, and you don't even know your neighbors. I mean, y'all might go to school together and meet at the bus, but then after y'all get off the bus, you go back to your area. But what do we do using places like this? Your rec centers. Everybody has a rec center in the area that operates after school until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. How can we use this as an opportunity to help what the school system is doing to be an extension of that we go out to the bigger community to make that happen? That's what I'm here for as a county commissioner, on what we can do, because I'm open. If you want to do a program, you give me an idea, you come with some plans, we will implement that at these rec centers.
I think what you were talking about with like the mental health things that Decatur High School, I think you said, was doing, I think all of anything relating to like mental health or anything like awareness things are great, but it really comes down to every time you come in contact with someone, you not making them feel like what they're saying doesn't matter. And like people in your neighborhood, people in your community, people in your schools, your parents, everyone you talk to feels like they matter to you. And if one person does that, people will branch off that because they'll be inspired by them. And if the more people that do that, the more people will want to do that, and the more people will feel like they can talk to those people.
How do you do that in the selfie generation?
What do you mean by selfie generation?
People now are focusing more on themselves. Like you said, everything on the social media is about, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
It's all about getting people to care. And once you have one person that cares, people will start caring because they want to see who that is.
It's, you heard the comment upstairs, up on the podium, where one gentleman said that, can you teach people to care? Or is caring kind of an innate? If caring is something we say is a solution, that people have to care about who's in front of them, that who they're talking to, and that when they're talking to them, that's the only person that exists. If caring is the baseline, can you actually, can I make you care?
Yes.
How?
Showing them. Actions speak louder than words. Be who you want them to be. You can't make that's their feeling. Care for them.
Yeah.
That's their
And so are we saying that some people are born to care and others are born not to care? And you can't teach someone?
Some have been conditioned not to care. Like some people don't have people to care for them, so they feel like
Because if caring is at the base of all this connectivity that we need to have, how do we instill that?
Do you have people that care for y'all? How do they show it? How do they show it? How do they show that they care?
talking.
Okay. What about you, man?